All right, so welcome everyone to the 2020 Education Summit. I'm Jerry Miller and I'm sector lead for the education team at Esri. On behalf of our entire team and many other people at Esri, we welcome you to our Education Summit. So in this plenary, we have some wonderful speakers lined up. So we have Mara Blake and Raina Murray, who work with Johns Hopkins University as part of the Data Services Division. So they're going to talk to us about the JH2 dashboard, not just the story of the dashboard itself, but also what it took to support the dashboard. So they're part of the larger team that provides support for the dashboard that continues to do so to this day. So they'll share their experiences, what that looks like, what they learned from it, and also just this trend in terms of supporting and working with public projects. And many of you in the audience do this already. So it's going to be highly beneficial just to take a glimpse of what is it that they experience, especially some of the changes that they underwent in terms of how they operate on a day-to-day basis, but also what it takes to support public projects. We'll also have Allison Meason, who leads the Geography and GIS program at Foothill Community College. And Allison and her team have worked very hard over the last couple of years to transition, to modernize all of their curriculum and to fully transition it to online. So we'll have her share all of those experiences and what they had to change in managing some of these changes and these workflows. And then we'll have Peter Knoop at the University of Michigan, who is a very, very strong supporter of GIS and cloud computing across campus, and one of the very early adopters of SaaS technology and ArcGIS Online and apps. And we'll take a look at the changes that they underwent on from the years ago when they introduced SaaS and when it comes to GIS across the Michigan campus, what that did for them, where did that take them? So Peter will share all of his stories as well. So for all of these plenary speakers, they're all going to focus on a number of different topics, but they're all going to speak to the changes that they had to undergo throughout from years prior, obviously through this time because of COVID as well. So the theme of our plenary, the theme of the conference itself, as well as the year of 2020 is navigating changes, especially because of COVID. And COVID changed education in many, many different ways. We saw it was very difficult in March timeframe when universities had to close doors and we had to kind of scramble and figure out how to transition quickly all of our teaching to be online. And it was not easy at all. We saw that demand for online learning skyrocketing. At the same time, we had to ensure this academic continuity. We had to ensure that our campuses continue to operate even from administrative perspective. And it's not all solved. We're going to continue to, obviously we're working on it. We'll continue to face some of these challenges and fall time frame and moving forward. This is not over. But something to keep in mind and to think about is that some of these changes, they were kind of on their way. They were there even before COVID happened. When we think about virtualization of technology, for example, or when we think about providing remote access, when we think about that learning takes place outside of the confines of the physical classroom, some of these things, they started happening way before COVID, as well as in terms of the digital skill set for our students, the mind frame, the overall change in education of what is it that ought to go in that digital skill set. And it's not just technology, but this lockdown, because of COVID, it accelerated digital transformation in a sense. And we saw much increased recognition for GIS, for geospatial technology in general, for maps. A lot of it is, yes, due to the dashboard, but overall, hopefully you saw some of that on your respective campuses. And this notion of digital skills, and again, here we don't just mean technology skills in general, but the skills that employers are looking for, problem solving, critical thinking, that are part of this overall importance, overall digital skill set that students ought to have, data literacy and data-driven decisions and so on. And of course, yes, mature learning system being part of those as we're delivering our courses. And the overarching theme across all of these is this notion of collaboration. And even as all of our plenary speakers share their stories, that this notion of collaboration is of extreme importance. It persists. And even yesterday in some of the workshops that we had, that was one of the main things that stood out. So to be successful, to survive, to move forward, we have to collaborate with our constituents across campus. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speakers. So Mara Blake and Raina Murray from Johns Hopkins. They're going to share their perspective of supporting the JHU dashboard, as well as what that really meant for them, some of the changes that they went through, and especially in terms of supporting public projects. So Mara and Raina, I will let you share. And also the other very inspiring thing is that, to me as an educator, the dashboard was created by a graduate student. So to me, that is probably one of the most inspirational things when we as educators can enable our graduate students to do this kind of transformational work. So Raina?
Yep. Great. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you to Esri for having us here today. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. We're excited to be here. Like Jerry said, I'm Raina Murray, and I'm here with my manager, Mara Blake. And we are speaking about our experiences working on the JHU Global COVID-19 Dashboard. We want to emphasize, though, that we're speaking on behalf of a larger group of individuals who have put a lot of time and effort into this dashboard, some of whom continue to work on this pretty much 24/7. You'll see some of their names to the right here. So this makes up a lot of the core team of individuals. This includes people from the Center for Systems and Science Engineering, as well as the Sheridan Libraries and the Applied Physics Laboratory, which, for those of you who don't know, is a not-for-profit research center that's affiliated with Johns Hopkins. And I want to emphasize that everyone listed here, this is not a comprehensive list of all the individuals who have been involved in this project. What we're trying to get at is that this has truly been a team effort, and we're very excited and also humbled to be speaking on behalf of our colleagues today. So our presentation is split into 3 parts. First, we're going to talk about how we got here, the story of this dashboard, how it was created. Then we're going to pivot to talking about our unit and how we managed to balance the need to support this dashboard with also our day-to-day responsibilities, managing GIS-related needs for the campus, as well as our other responsibilities. And then finally, we're going to look at what we see are some of the impacts and trends in higher education that have come out of this time period and because of this dashboard. So with that, I'll get started on the story. It starts, as a lot of things do, with coffee. So Dr. Lauren Gardner, who is an associate professor of civil and systems engineering at Hopkins, was talking with her graduate student, Encheng Frank Dong, over coffee in late January, and they got to talking about the coronavirus outbreak. And Frank, who has some experience in GIS, mentioned that he was interested in looking into trying to track the outbreak. Lauren thought this was a great idea and told him, why not make it a side project? Go have fun, see what you can make. And Frank went home that night. He put together the dashboard and he shared it with Lauren the next day. She thought it looked great. She then tweeted about it on her account and boarded a plane immediately after that. By the time she landed, her phone she was just inundated with emails and calls and messages concerning this dashboard. And it really didn't stop after that. The interest in the dashboard really only grew from that point on. Here you have a graph on the left that shows the total dashboard views for the first 3 months of its existence in millions. And on the right, you have the total number of feature layer requests for the same time period, but in billions. And feature layer requests are a really nice metric for us because basically what it's demonstrating is anytime someone is on the dashboard and they click on a feature, or they click on the map, or they click on the table, and it leads to a query or a filter on the underlying data, that is basically a feature layer request. And so for us, it's a really nice way to gauge not only to how many eyes we have on this dashboard, but how much interaction people are having with this dashboard and how much they're digging into our data. And as you can imagine, this is sort of beyond anything any of us had really ever worked with. And so what started as a side project for Frank and Lauren quickly became a top priority. And as COVID-19 spread across the globe and became a pandemic, the interest in our dashboard and the demand for the data we were producing only continued to grow. So we had to mobilize. And this graph kind of shows you some key points throughout the first 3 months. So in January, APL, the library, and Esri all joined Frank and Lauren and the rest of the team at CSSE to provide support for this dashboard. And in February, Esri provided a lot of backend support to help us stabilize our instance of ArcGIS online and to just sort of deal with this high demand. And this led to a bit of a fun metric that we like to talk about, which is that, when this first came out, we were trying to understand, like, how big is this, in the grand scheme of things. where does this rank? These numbers are just really hard for us to comprehend. And the team that we were working with at Esri said, like, yeah, these numbers are intense. They're very impressive. But, you know, it's not as bad as Pokemon Go was for us, because when Pokemon Go was big, a developer created a accompanying app and used an Esri base map. So Esri was sort of saying to us, like, yeah, your demand is really high right now, but it hasn't gotten to that level yet. And so that was in February. And by the time April rolled around, we were told, yes, your demand completely exceeds Pokemon Go. And so that was a really big deal for us. So as you can imagine, as the demands for the dashboard and the scope for this project grew, we had to also increase the teams that manage and support this. I've talked a lot about some of the teams that are providing technical support for this dashboard. So this includes doing things like improving our data automation and workflows, providing that backend infrastructure support, et cetera. It centers around Lauren, Frank, Hongru, and others at the Center for Systems Science and Engineering. But like I mentioned before, it includes Esri, it includes the Applied Physics Laboratory, and it includes us in the library. We also, though, had a large team of both individuals and departments from across the university providing a lot of essential project support. So this covers things like communications outreach, managing legal related issues that come up, helping with cybersecurity review, et cetera. And there are a large number of individuals who have worked on this project and continue to do so on project support. This also includes external partners, some of whom are listed here, who likewise, as this project grew, jumped in to provide some expertise and guidance. And I just want to emphasize that the list I have here is not comprehensive. There are many more individuals and teams that have helped out. So if you've been following the dashboard, you'll notice that it's changed a lot in the look and feel over time. And this change reflects that how we've evolved this project and how it's scaled up over time to meet this level of demand. And as we were able to sort of make more sophisticated workflows, and also as we were able to get access to more different types of information and data. Likewise, how users can access our underlying data has evolved over time. So we use ArcGIS Online. Our underlying feature layers are available through ArcGIS Online. They are also part of the Esri Living Atlas. But we also now have a GitHub repository where users can go to grab our latest data, as well as time series data and other reports and metrics. And all the interest also culminated in the creation by Johns Hopkins University of a coronavirus resource center. And so this really serves as a nice one-stop shop for anyone who wants to look at a large amount of the resources and research that Hopkins is producing on this global pandemic. And the numbers that you see there on the left-hand side of that website screenshot are pulled directly from the dashboard. So, you know, what started as a small project quickly morphed into something that had global interest and demand. And we had to respond to that. And so as we grew, we had to focus a lot on how we scaled this up in a manageable way, and also in a very fast way. And one of the things that we continue to do is work to manage this change. And you can expect to see the dashboard continuing to evolve over time. I think, in fact, there might be some updates going in fairly soon this week. So we're looking forward to continue to support and watch it grow. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mara to talk about the balancing act.
Thanks so much, Raina. So the balancing act is really what we want to share with you, which is how we dealt with what before the pandemic was what we spent our full-time jobs and lives doing, and then also incorporating support for the dashboard. At the time, campus was transitioning to a remote environment across the board. And of course, as you all know, at that time, we were dealing with pandemic conditions and the stresses and strains associated with that. So I'll step back a minute and tell you a little bit about our team and where we're based on campus. So we're in the Johns Hopkins University Sheridan Libraries, and that's a collection of museums and libraries. And we primarily serve the main campus, but certainly collaborate across the university and across the institution. Within the Sheridan Libraries, we're based in the Data Management Directorate, which is a division devoted to the full-scale support of data from beginning to end. And so that we have 3 teams that comprise that directorate. The Digital Research and Curation Center, which is a team of software and systems engineers who build new softwares and systems to support our needs as a community. And most of our colleagues from the library that also contribute to this project are from the DRCC, so huge props to them. We have another team, Library Applications Group, that administers and maintains the systems that keep the library running, especially in our digital environment. And then us, the Data Services team, and we are a group focused on user-facing services, so helping the students, faculty, and staff of Johns Hopkins University work with data. And our team, we provide support for data throughout a research or a teaching life cycle. So we have about 8 people, and we work with our folks on campus to help them find, use, visualize, manage, and share data. And specifically within that, we provide support for GIS. And what our GIS services look like, you can see here, is support for the Esri educational site license, making sure all the JHU affiliates have access to the software and tools that they need through that license, as well as the part of that administering our organizational instance of ArcGIS Online, which Raina is certainly our primary administrator for that system. And then also supporting GIS needs more broadly. So having consultations with students and faculty about how they might incorporate GIS tools, techniques, functionality into their teaching, into their research, and then building skills amongst our users in GIS tools and techniques through workshops and trainings. And so since that was really what we were doing primarily, when the pandemic hit, we were hit with this balancing act of supporting both the dashboard and our regular needs. And so the dashboard has its own component of support, but also our regular services were transitioning at that time as campus transitioned to remote, and we transitioned our service delivery to a virtual environment as well to meet the needs of our users. Supporting the dashboard and what went into that for our team from the library. And we really spent about 2 months this spring providing almost 24/7 support for the project, which included designing and setting up and monitoring a server that hosts the data workflow for the project in collaboration with our colleagues from the DRCC, helping deal with any issues with the Esri license agreement in the project, cybersecurity and coordinating reviews around that. And fortunately, as the project has matured, the need for our 24/7 support has reduced, but we continue to support the project regularly and routinely. To give you a sense of how complex this project is and why we have such a large team and large collaborative team supporting it, and why it required so much 24/7 effort and still does, you can see here there's a huge workflow, and there's a whole workflow beforehand with the data sources and the server that processes the data, the GitHub repository, even before we get into the ArcGIS Online environment. And then once we're in that environment, because the demands on the dashboard are so high, we actually have 2 organizations supporting the needs of the dashboard. Of course, at the same time, as we were all dealing with our campuses were transitioning to remote learning, we were transitioning ourselves individually to working remotely and delivering all of our services via a remote environment. So really required a lot of changes for us in what we do normally. And so that looked like converting our workshops, which, as you might imagine, tend to be very hands-on, to a webinar format so we could still make that information accessible to our users, switching from having consultations in person to a video conference consultation, and then trying to supplement other services that we provided in person, like access to our computer lab and a staffed computer lab where someone could be working and have a question, to offering a chat service so that users could have that immediate response, working with our colleagues across campus to offer remote access, which Jerry alluded to geospatial software as people have left and don't have access to the campus computers that they relied on before. And then really we're seeing in our unit an increased interest in GIS overall and in dashboards specifically. So dealing with more volume, more interest in workshops, consultations, and so forth as we're dealing with all these changes. So it's been fun. So as I said, we're based in the library, and GIS services might be based different places on your campuses, might be in an IT unit, might be in an academic division. So I just wanted to take a minute to mention our values and our mission as a library and the connection to this project. So in the library, we're really devoted to connecting people to information, stewarding that information, and providing people the skills and knowledge that they need to understand and make use of that information. So in the case of this project, it was a clear fit for our mission and our values, and very easy to engage in the balancing act that we described and devote the energy to it to make it as successful as we could. So throughout this project, the approach has really been key to be as flexible as possible as we deal with this constantly changing landscape, both for the dashboard project and our services, to adapt to the changes that we see, and to try something, see how it goes, and iterate if we learn things from that first try and improve it. And that's really the approach we've taken. We think our team would agree that this approach is crucial for both the dashboard and keeping our regular work going. And Raina is going to talk a little bit now about what's next.
All right. Thanks, Mara. So over the course of working on this project, we've observed several impacts and trends, and Jerry has alluded to some of this. One of the first ones that we observed is just an increased visibility and awareness of geospatial technology overall, irrespective of just our dashboard. As these news headlines and articles show, I think with the pandemic, and there's just been a lot more awareness that GIS is a tool that can be used to help understand and track how it spreads over time. However, specifically, we've also seen a growing awareness of the Esri web ecosystem and tools. As Mara mentioned, we've had a lot of interest on campus from users who saw the dashboard and were very excited and wanted to learn more about the Esri suite of tools that we have available to them. And the screenshots here show Esri's COVID-19 gallery. And our dashboard is on there, but you can see that there's just an incredible amount of other apps that are out there now, and it's really cool to see. Internally, we've seen a growing interest in using geospatial technology for research projects by researchers, faculty, staff, and students. And this screenshot here, you might have seen this on the Coronavirus Resource Center that JHU produces. We've had a lot of other dashboards and other apps come out. This one specifically looking at US cases by county level. And this project, which is by the Center for Civic Impact, as well as this one that I'm showing here, which is called COVID Control, have also led to us noticing another trend, which is that we're seeing a movement away from research-only projects or research-specific projects to projects that are more public-facing and public service-oriented in nature. And this has required a change in our approach as we've moved from sort of a research development model to a product development mindset. We're sort of taking taking components from both of those different mindsets together. We have a lot more products from research groups that are being developed that need to be production ready for a wider audience than maybe what they were used to previously. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mara one last time to talk about this, to sort of summarize this changing landscape.
Thanks so much, Raina. So as we look and see this growing interest in GIS, especially web GIS, what does it mean for our community? And we really think this calls for our community that's meeting here the next couple of days, the GIS education community, to lay the path of excellence in these areas and these types of projects. And we can prepare our community by identifying educational and training opportunities in the skills that are really critical to the success of these projects. And these skills include fluency with web GIS, in particular, the ability to manage ArcGIS online organizations and administer them successfully, the programming abilities that are needed to support this type of work, particularly in Python, and then the soft skills that are needed, particularly for a large collaborative project around project management and product management. As we get towards the end, we wanted to share some numbers with you that help give a sense of the impact of the COVID-19 global dashboard. And you can see some of these numbers for dashboard views and feature layer requests for ArcGIS Online. And you can see they're in the billions. And I'll tell you that when we start getting up in the billions, it's really hard for me to like grapple with those numbers and understand what they mean. So if it helps you in terms of dashboard views, it's the equivalent roughly if 1/3 of the total population of the entire world had viewed the dashboard, which I think is amazing. But even more amazing are the feature layer requests. And so this number in billions of feature layer requests is approximately if every person in the world had made a request on the feature layer 23 times. So these numbers really blow us away. They continue to blow us away. And then you can see similarly with the GitHub repository, it's extremely active. There's file changes, there are additions, deletions, and this shows how active the team continues to be maintaining this dashboard, keeping it up to date, dealing with all the changes in the data, in the landscape, to make the dashboard more effective and a better resource for us all as we're dealing with COVID-19 across the world. So when we think about this project, it's really exciting to see how something that was an idea over coffee and a start by a grad student became an important global resource during a real time for all of us of crisis and pandemic, which really highlights the impact of GIS, particularly out of our higher ed environment and what it can do for the world, the real public. And also identifies for us some learning opportunities that we as a community can take on and develop within our members. If you're interested in learning more, we have another webinar coming up, Brena and I, that we'd be delighted to invite you to. You can see there's a link here. I'm not sure the information is up, but it should be up soon, so we'd love to have you there. We also have some credits and resources if you're interested, but with that, we'd really just love to thank Jerry and Angie on behalf of the whole project team for having us. It was really great to share our experience with you. We hope it was helpful, and we're hoping these next couple of days are an opportunity to start some conversations about this and really start working on it. So thank you so much. And we'd just like to recognize the rest of our team who's not presenting today.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Mara and Raina, just for the insights on the dashboard, for the experiences learned, for the juggling act of it all, and just for everything that you just shared today. Very, very interesting, very inspirational as well. So next we'll have Allison Meason. As I mentioned, Allison leads the GIS and Geography department at Foothills College. So she's going to talk to us about the transition that they went, this change that they went over the last couple of years to move their programs to online, and specifically thinking back to some of the skill set that Mara and Raina mentioned in terms of WebGIS, in terms of programming and such. So this is kind of the the epiphany of this. So Allison, I'll let you go ahead and share your
Thank
story.
you, Jerry. So I'm Allison Meason. I teach geography and geospatial technology at Foothill College, and we've had GIS classes for about 20 years. 2 years ago, we switched our program to completely online. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to share with you some of our lessons learned and how we navigated that change successfully. And now actually our program is even more successful than it ever has been in the past. So to get started, a little bit about our program. Foothill Community College is located in the heart of Silicon Valley. So we are in the center of a vibrant high-tech workforce. We have a lot of our students in our program are actually tech workers who are looking to gain some additional skills in geospatial technology. We are also seeing a lot of students in our program who recently graduated with bachelor's degrees, and they are trying to enter the workforce and are realizing that they need to have some additional geospatial technology skills in order to successfully land their jobs. So that's really the role of the community college, is to provide that upskilling workforce support. So our program started back in 2000 with some negotiated shared lab space and about 20 licenses to ArcView software. So we have grown significantly since then. We garnered a professional advisory board from a local industry that has really helped us grow and shape our program over the years. The biggest shift that our program has really undergone is a shift in, starting in 2016, we shifted to a campus single sign-on license. So this is using our student information system, and we work very closely with our technology services staff so that students could access the cloud computing resources of ArcGIS Online simply by using their student ID number and their login to our student information system. So that has really been sort of the big key piece in making this transition to online successful. And in 2018, we moved our program completely online. And this was really facilitated by that shift to the campus single sign-on and the access to all of the cloud resources associated with ArcGIS Online and the ability for students to access ArcGIS Pro through that single sign-on license. Our advisory board was really key with helping us make that shift online. And you might be wondering, why did we shift online far before the whole COVID thing happened? And really the key was, again, market forces and our advisory board. So we were seeing that a lot of our students were trying to fit their classes in between work and family. And so it was really hard for us to schedule a specific time for those face-to-face classes. So by offering the classes asynchronously, we were able to meet the needs of a much larger student group. So a little bit about our program. So it has grown over the years. It has shifted in response to the shifting needs of the geospatial technology market. We currently offer 3 certificates that range from 21 to 43 quarter units, and we also offer an AS degree. And really key to that is the fact that our advisory board has pushed us to include Python programming and database classes as part of that certificate. So students, depending on which certificate they get, take between 1 and 3 programming classes as a part of their certificate. And that's really backfilling that skill set that the advisory board has asked us for. Also, our remote sensing class has shifted over the years. We've gone from pure satellites remote sensing to more drone-based remote sensing, again, working with the shifting market forces. So our primary student group, again, is upskilling for earlier mid-career students. These are people who are coming back to the community college just for that the GIS program. But we're also seeing that we're starting to get more and more students who are sort of our classic community college transfer students. And that is because of this integration of GIS campus-wide with the single sign-on. And I will talk a little bit more about that, but that is really key for getting those undergraduate level students into our GIS classes. So a little bit about what we need to do to lay the foundation for a successful online program. And it really is a collaboration, a 3-way collaboration between our program faculty, our administration, and our technology services. So our program faculty work together very closely. We meet annually. We have a unified curriculum. And we work together very closely with our administration. Our administration is completely on board with our program and very, very supportive. And we've been very active with getting them involved with our program by inviting them to events, inviting them to the advisory board. So it is our goal that everyone in the administration can tell you about what GIS is, not just an acronym. And then finally, our technology services, having a close relationship, personal relationship with folks in tech services is really key, again, to getting that that web-based, cloud-based GIS to successfully work. We also have a web of support that is necessary for that online GIS to actually work successfully, starting with a strong course management system. So we have a course management system called Canvas. You may also at your campus use something like Blackboard or Moodle, but that is really important for offering the classes online, to have that single avenue for students to access curriculum and to interact with each other. Next, we have the campus site license and the single sign-on. And in order to have those functioning seamlessly, we really work closely with our technology services staff. So the single sign-on works with, as I talked about before, with our campus student information system. So students and staff just need to sign on with their student ID and their login to the student information system in order to access the tech services and to access all of the GIS resources we have. Finally, and probably the most important piece, is our VMware virtual desktop. So that is supported by our tech services. It's a cloud-based set of computers that all of our students can log into in order to access those more resource-intensive software products like ArcGIS Pro. So this really allows for equity of access for our students. So a lot of our students only have Chromebooks in order to access the internet. And so then they can do GIS with a Chromebook. All they need to do is log into our VMware virtual desktop. So that has really been sort of the linchpin to allowing us to fully offer GIS classes online. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is cross-campus integration. So while we do have ArcGIS Pro that we offer with the VMware virtual desktop, we really lead with our lighter apps. So the single sign-on has allowed us to integrate ArcGIS online throughout the campus. So I take my little dog and pony show around the campus and talk to the different departments and promote the use of ArcGIS online. And we currently have projects in anthropology, biology. The business people were really wowed by the resources in the Living Atlas. And our archaeology field school also uses ArcGIS online. So in that way, we have really integrated GIS throughout the campus. So our key takeaways for this project is, first, that online learning is not distant learning. So you have to be really integrated with all of the resources with your campus, and to be integrated with the market and engage your professional advisory board to be responsive to market needs. Now, the COVID thing completely changed everything with the market, but having that agility to shape your program is really, really key to success. Also, cross-campus integration and collaboration yields for wide adoption of the software. So having that simple single sign-on to be able to tell people, hey, all you need to do is have your campus ID number and your student information system password, and you can have access to all these resources, really allows for people to get excited and easily integrate the technology into their classes. Build personal connections with your technology staff. Get to know your technology staff so that you have people you can reach out to when you need support. And finally, get administrators excited about geospatial technology. Invite them to conferences, invite them to your advisory board, keep them abreast of what's going on, and share with them your student success stories. That is really key to making this a successful cross-campus program. And that is it. So I think
wonderful. Yep, so next is Peter. Just wonderful job, Allison. Just excellent examples of responding to those market changes, updating the curriculum, moving it online, the cross-campus collaboration, the infusion with all the other disciplines, and getting people excited. Just absolutely phenomenal. So next, Peter. So Peter is going to discuss, as I mentioned earlier, navigating the change geo-enabled campus, and how do we get there? And again, just with Peter, just very early adopter of technology. They started doing this long time ago. So he'll talk about these changes, but the key thing to keep in mind when COVID happened, they really didn't have to do all that much to change their workflows. So Peter, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Well, I'm Peter Knoop. I'm at the University of Michigan. I'm in our College of Literature, Science, and the Arts in a group called Technology Services. And what I specifically work on is faculty, staff, and students who are interested in using GIS and cloud computing and extended reality. And what I'm going to talk about today is this notion of navigating change in a Cloud GIS campus. And so, we've heard terms like geospatial cloud, geo-enabled, web GIS, cloud GIS. For the purpose of today, I'm just going to use those all sort of interchangeably. And the two things I want to talk about are this long-term desktop-centric to cloud-centric GIS transition. So a lot of us, started out in the early days with just, ArcInfo or ArcMap more recently. But the whole cloud concept that ArcGIS Online brought in of all these different apps, including the desktop ones that make up a cloud campus. And then we'll say a little bit about the short-term change we had to navigate with regards to COVID-19. For those of you who weren't able to attend the workshops yesterday, I would certainly recommend going to the recordings. Eventually, this will be a link to them here. But some of the key things that came out of them, as well as what you heard Allison just talk about, are that having a centrally funded education institution agreement, adopting best practices like single sign-on, enterprise logins, auto-provisioning accounts, so everyone just automatically gets access to everything. And then collaboration, building bridges between IT groups, administration, and GIS are really the key pillars of success to getting to a cloud GIS campus. There's also some case studies and success stories you can find today on Esri's higher education site, which describe the process at University of Michigan and UC San Diego. So in terms of how we navigated the change, we got our ArcGIS Online instance December of 2011. I was leading a group of students along with my colleague Casey Lohman at Michigan and Maribela Benito at the University of Madrid on a geology field trip we planned for that summer. And this web tool seemed like a great way to pull in the geologic survey maps from the Spanish government, which they'd already made available online, into web maps that we could use in the seminar courses leading up to this. And we discovered the Esri Green app, if you remember back in those days, where you could actually look at your maps on your smartphones at the time while you were out in the field. And this seemed really great, except that I had to manually create accounts for everyone. And that, well, the tools were really cool and the potential seemed great. It wasn't really going to scale to the size of our campus. And in 2013, Esri helped address this by introducing single sign-on integration so that we could use our regular login process on campus, the username and password people already had, a familiar login experience, as well as the ability to automatically provision accounts and give them a set number of credits and some other things. It didn't quite do everything we wanted to do. It didn't take care of giving licenses for everything to everyone. So we ended up doing a bit of scripting with the ArcGIS REST API to handle that. And that really seems like over the course of the year, the point we became a Cloud GIS campus where we were able to give access to everything to everyone who came along without having to manually manage it. In 2017, the ArcGIS API for Python had its first release, and that's certainly a more approachable programmatic experience, I think, for people than the ArcGIS REST API. So I think that made it simpler for other campuses to follow this path. And then in June of last year, they added new member defaults to ArcGIS Online, which gave you this ability to go in the interface and assign licenses and other things. And there were a couple hiccups with that, but by the time December rolled around, you really had finally reached a point that if you wanted to be a Cloud GIS campus, you didn't have to do any scripting anymore. It was all configurable within the interface. And so how do you tell if you're a Cloud GIS campus? I like to think that if you know what all of your GIS users on campus are using GIS for, then you're not a Cloud GIS campus yet. And I think, the example you heard from John Hopkins, a grad student could just go off and create a dashboard without having to ask anyone for access or permission to use the tools. They're just available in there for anyone on your campus to use. Shortly before the user conference last year, I happened to be out running errands and heard a story in our local NPR station about a citizen science project for tracking bloom debris on the Great Lakes. So that was the first I heard of this project that Laura Bryan, a master's student in our School of Environment and Sustainability, she'd put together feature services, web maps, a Survey 123 form, a story map, a dashboard. And this project was already up and running and out in the public before we even knew about it as administrators of the system. And so that perhaps, points out another thing is you don't really need to know what people are doing on a day-to-day basis with your system, but it's a good idea to keep track of an aggregate or summary usage statistics. So we have our ArcGIS usage dashboard that gives us an idea of how many users we have, where they're from on our campus, and what they're doing with it in an aggregate in general. But there's, you don't have anyone who knows what everyone's doing with Microsoft PowerPoint on a given basis, but you probably have someone on your campus that can tell you how many people and how often the Office products are being used. So I'm going to dissect this dashboard piece by piece here. So how many users do we have? At the end of July, we had 6,039 users. That represents about 6% of our potential user base of 100,000 faculty, staff, and students across all 3 of our campuses, Ann Arbor, Dearborn, and Flint. You can see from the growth chart here, the registered users by day, that the actual slope of that line is still increasing. So we're seeing the growth rate increasing year over year. So maybe next year we'll be at 10% of those 100,000 people using GIS. Unique logins per week. Now from this, you can tell that not all those 6,000 people are using it every day. We have about 5 to 10% of the people who are regular users. And I imagine a good portion of these folks are ArcGIS Pro users. But that other 5,000 part of our user base are folks who are using the non-desktop apps, things like Story Maps, GeoPlanner, Collector, and they might do a story map during one semester in a history class, so they're not using it every day. And interestingly, when we do look at classes, we did a survey of course syllabi trying to find mentions of GIS, and we found of the courses that were using GIS for course projects, less than 20% of them actually mentioned GIS in the syllabus. Just like courses these days don't mention you're going to use Adobe Acrobat to read a PDF or you're going to give a presentation with PowerPoint. It's really becoming a tool that is just a tool for most disciplines. If we look closely at the data here this spring, and it probably shows up best in the unique logins per week, we can see a continual increase year after year, but there's an extra large bump in the spring of this year. And we attribute that after talking to some folks that there's researchers who aren't going into the field who've decided to work with existing data that they might not have done anything with until next fall. We just did a workshop the other day for a bunch of archaeology grad students who are building Survey 123 forms and data schemas for new projects in the future. And then we've also had some new virtual courses in our spring and summer course offerings that have adopted GIS activities that weren't there in the past. So where are our users coming from? Across the entire university, we have someone in at least more than 70% of our units using GIS. And if we look at students, there's more than 80% of the degree programs that have students using GIS. And so in aggregate here, that we think this dashboard really helps communicate the message that GIS use is broadly spread across the university, and that GIS is just another tool for everyone to use. And this last observation, access and reliance on self-help is better than no access at all. If I go back to looking at our, if I go look at our live dashboard and we're looking at the degree programs here, I want to point out that this large white chunk is not a single program. It's just an artifact of the dashboard is limited to 300 slices. And so we have 410 students in 258 degree programs is this big chunk. We've got another big chunk here is that all the undeclared majors in LS&A. So it's not really a single unit that has a lot of users in it. Whereas under a single program that has a lot of users in it. In our College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, which is one of the bigger colleges on our campus, we have a good portion of the users, and I myself am there to support GIS. And we have folks in public health and the School of Environment and Sustainability that also support GIS. And the library is there for larger groups or for all of campus, but there are some units that don't have local GIS support. But by giving them access, they can always go off to GeoNet, YouTube videos, whatnot, and figure out how to use the tools. So another thing I want to focus on is desktop GIS users. They certainly haven't gone away. They're still first-class citizens in this Cloud GIS campus. They can certainly do more now using Pro with all the additions. And when we looked at the numbers for 2020 year to date, we have 817 Pro users versus 108 ArcMap users. So I will point out that I myself show up in both columns. Every now and then I have to open an old ArcMap project to get some data out. And also a lot of our intro GIS courses haven't had a chance to transition to Pro yet. So a lot of those 108 are actually our intro GIS students. So one of the trends we're certainly seeing with people who are doing work with GIS is they're not moving from ArcMap anymore. They're just getting started from the get-go in ArcGIS Pro and able to leverage all the advantages of Cloud GIS. So That's our long-term pattern of desktop-centric to cloud-centric GIS usage, but superimposed on this, like everyone else, we had to deal with the COVID crisis in the beginning of spring. Now, one important thing I want to highlight here about the Cloud GIS approach is this chunk that talks about work anywhere. And that really came into play for us as we considered what happened. What I'll focus on first here is the software as the service components of the ArcGIS cloud. So ArcGIS Online, Story Maps, Collector. For us, there's really no change to navigate here. We're managing ArcGIS using those best practices, which means everything is pretty much automated. So as usage went up, there was no additional administrative load on us to deal with. That can just scale as it goes. Now, when it comes to the desktop applications, however, this is where we had to do some work. Things like ArcGIS Pro and City Engine, particularly when it came to teaching, there was a lot of reliance on access to physical machines in classrooms, and we lost that access as we moved visual. So 3 different ways we address this is one is we already had in place self-install instructions for personal machines. People, students, faculty, or staff could already go to one of our institutional file shares. We happen to use Box and authorize through the same single sign-on method and download the installers and download the single-use licenses if they needed them. And so there wasn't really any additional load on us there to help with that. And then also the switching from the heavyweight to lightweight GIS tools. So maybe you were using Pro, but you were doing things in it that you could also do in ArcGIS Online. And so if you didn't have access to a computer on which you could run Pro, maybe you could do the same thing through the web browser on whatever computer you did have access to. So again, that was something we didn't really have to do anything in terms of administering ArcGIS, it just scaled. Now, as we often wear 2 hats, a lot of us support GIS as well. That meant we were getting a few more questions about how do I do this as they move to a new tool. The one area where we had to do some work was in terms of virtual environments. And we have a campus-wide VMware environment that provides access to all faculty, staff, and students to hundreds of different software titles in a virtual environment. It's unfortunately, the hardware behind it isn't quite up to the task of some of the more complicated GIS analysis you might do. And as we were nearing the end of the winter semester, of course, our intro GIS courses were getting to the fun stuff, the complicated GIS tasks. And that environment wasn't quite cutting it for them. Parallel to this, we also have a couple different options in Amazon Web Services as cloud-based solutions, Amazon's AppStream and EC2 instances. We already had those in place for researchers who faced sort of the same kind of problem even in the past, where maybe they needed to do a couple weeks or a couple months worth of intensive GIS work, but they don't necessarily need to go out and buy a $3,000 GIS workstation to do it, when they could instead operate in the cloud environment for tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars to get the tasks they needed done. And so we repurposed some of the instances in our AppStream environment to support the students in GIS classes that didn't have personal machines on which they could install ArcGIS. So what do we take away from this? I think, I would encourage you to fully embrace Cloud GIS and enable your campus, really this notion of empower everyone with everything. It's an investment with an immediate payoff. It reduces the amount of resources spent administrating ArcGIS. It actually costs more to restrict access and takes more time to restrict access than it does to just make it available to everyone. And your site license includes functionally unlimited named users, functionally unlimited number of licenses. So it's not really an issue any longer. It also provides long-term flexibility and scalability to deal with these hard to predict or unexpected needs like coronavirus proved to be. And so how do you get there? The keys, again, are a centrally funded education institution agreement, automate administrative tasks for ArcGIS, and build a team of experts and stakeholders to help get you there. Bring in folks from IT who can help you get single sign-on set up. Work with folks in your administration that are already funding the bills for other campus-wide systems. And then lastly, I think these ArcGIS usage dashboards make great infographics or perhaps even icons to represent your cause. University of Michigan, Penn State, we share ours publicly. You feel free to go in there and click around to see all the different degree programs that are supported. We would encourage you to go out and make your own dashboard. There's a GeoNet post and a story map with essentially the same content. It will point you off to an ArcGIS notebook that as an administrator in your system, you could run today to create your own dashboard. The University of Idaho, they haven't made theirs public yet, but they have some great screenshots here and examples of the next step you can take this to. Pull it data into insights and merge it with your enterprise directory services to get even more detail about information. And so with that, I'll wrap it up and hand it back to Jerry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. So I'll go ahead and Start sharing again. So lots and lots of wonderful insights from all of our presenters, and Peter obviously showing this dashboard, and just some of the other institutions that have launched these dashboards. It's just a great way for portraying the value of GIS across campuses. So what is next? So change, we know that change is here to stay. Throughout, these are a few kind of key points that we saw throughout all the speakers today. This increased recognition for GIS that hopefully brings, for all of us geospatial professionals and education, brings some of these additional opportunities. Also, in all three of the speakers today, we saw this thread of collaboration being that pillar of success. It's just one of the most critical things that we do on our respective campuses. And then broad access to technology, the enablement of many of other disciplines, again, to showcase that value of GIS. Then something else that we talked about, and Peter put it well in terms of desktop-centric workflows. It's not like they're not second-grade, second-class citizen, and they're still a first-class citizen. There's still a place for desktop, but this interesting trend, especially with SaaS, that we start with some of the SaaS with apps and such, and some of the desktop-centric workflows, they're kind of the follow through. Some of them are a little more complex things that we do. So something else that just us as an education team in terms of what our role is, what we can do. So I hope that we've worked closely with many of you, but we are there to support you through some of these changes. And you obviously, of course, could be at different stages of change, or whether it's updating curriculum, whether it's technology access and things like that. But we look forward to these next couple of days to discussing some of the topics that were brought up in a little bit more detail. Again, just to express our support as a team in terms of you making this transition. Some of it coming down to licensing, technology access, and a couple of the speakers mentioned, so both Peter and Allison mentioned the site license. Some of you know what is that, but institution agreement that brings some of these additional opportunities, empowers remote learning, supports the cloud-first approach, enables all these disciplines. And something else that we didn't necessarily call out in this session, but campus operations from the administration side of things for some of you that are working in planning offices and facilities, utilities and such. So obviously wonderful benefits there as well. And I specifically want to call out some of the teaching and learning resources that as educators, all of us, we leverage them. And there are many teams across Esri that produce content for education. Some of them, you've seen them before, they've been around for a long time, but all of them have made wonderful enhancements, even just within the last few months, even within in support of COVID, with Esri Press books, the training courses that we have, the Learn ArcGIS teams, again, specific call out to them. They've done a phenomenal job just investing times and resources and creating, outputting new content that we can leverage in our own classes, just to get started with GIS, kind of a easy way to infuse it across multiple different disciplines. So just kudos to all of these different teams for being there, and specifically with Learn team, to encouraging that collaboration that is there. Again, the sense of community as part of Learn ArcGIS, to collaboration from educators. So we're just wonderful, very happy to be part of all of these educational teams at Esri. And something that, again, usually the other, the face-to-face Ed Summit, we do have sessions with all of the teams, and just to kind of get to talk to them, get to see what's new. Just because of the virtual format, we're not going to do it, but we do have videos that each of these teams created. So that's something that you can take a look at and learn what is happening with all of these teams. So just a little bit of, as we start closing up this plenary session, something to mention about community involvement. So even when COVID happened, just, I very vaguely, not vaguely, I very specifically remember that time when, again, just it was so abrupt and campuses closed. And, we all as educators were kind of left in this scrambling state. And to me, one of the most amazing things was seeing educators come together, participate in webinars and discussions and brown backs and all of these meetings just to share what they're doing. And it could have been something like, okay, I don't quite have this one figured out, but here's where I am, helping each other. So this sort of community involvement has been one of the most precious things. And we hope, and obviously it's been there before COVID as well. And the hope is that we continue this community involvement, just this contribution. And special thanks again to all of our panelists, presenters here today in the plenary, and panelists throughout the rest of the workshop. So enjoy it, do stay engaged moving forward. And again, it is all about sharing our experiences.